Hello and welcome to episode 69 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the casual spike, focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies in Modern and Pioneer. Cards too, when there's new ones to talk about. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, it is very nice to see you, my friend.
Yeah, pleasure is mine. I was looking forward to today's episode. New cards.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about these again. And we got Dave back, I think. Is that Dave?
I think that's the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
It is so nice to be back. I'm really excited to talk about some of these cards that I missed out last week. Here's the thing that bumps me out the most. I do not have any corrections to issue on the things that you all said last week.
Nice.
Which is a real drag, because usually I'd love to come and just hammer you guys after I've been off for a week. But you know what? I think Everett saved you. So,
yeah, Everett did a really good job keeping us on the straight and narrow, providing some guidance.
Yeah, and polite as well. Yeah, I think this card looks like a trap. But it seems cool.
I think the card you like is a trap, but good luck.
On this week's episode, we break down the results and decks from last weekend's Pioneer Super Qualifier on MTGO. That's Magic Online, if this is your first time listening to the Dive Down. Then we dive into another round of spoilers from Ikoria, Lair of the Behemoths, or as you probably know it, Elob. But first, a little housekeeping. Shout out this week to Nico L. for increasing their Patreon support. Thank you so much. Especially in this day and age. We love to see it.
Yeah, no new patrons this week, but that's okay. We know that spending extra money isn't really what people are looking to do, but just so you know, if you do want to support us, if you like the Dive Down, even $1 an episode is super helpful to us, and it gets you access to our Slack server. You can talk to us. You can talk to the Dive Down Nation every day. Higher tiers get things like tokens, pins, stickers, a custom designed playmat, all kinds of stuff like that.
Dave keeps threatening us with a hat.
Keeps threatening. The hat will exist at some point. I know it.
All the hat factories are closed right now. I don't know if people realize that, but it's tough to get a hat right now. So,
if you're a haberdash, get at us.
I think it's a milliner is the term you're looking for. That's what a person who makes hats is. A haberdasher would be a person who makes clothes.
Really?
Today I learned.
We do appreciate the ongoing support of everyone in the Dive Down Nation. Look forward to meeting some new citizens, hopefully in the near future. If you want to support us, if you want to join the Dive Down Nation, go to patreon.com/thedivedown and see what we have to offer you.
And as always, the Dive Down is brought to you in part by manatraders.com. Manatraders.com, the best way to rent Magic Online cards for Modern or Pioneer.
Or both.
Or both, yeah. And they are doing some cool stuff. You know, they announced a tournament series a little while ago. We're keeping an eye out for more details on that. But if you would like to, check them out and throw us a little bit of support while you do it, you can go to manatraders.com and input the code, the Dive Down, all one word, lowercase, to get 15% off your first 3 months of rentals. Manatraders.com.
Thanks, buddies, for telling people how to support the show, and all of our fans and friends and listeners who've been supporting us for all these years. But now Shane's over at the news desk, hot off the internet.
I love the internet. It gives me all my information. In keeping with our trend of looking at Magic Online results, we're going to head back to Pioneer this week, go over an 8-round Super Qualifier that took place this last weekend. So as usual, we'll go over the top 8 in some detail, then we'll head into the top 32 metagame. We can monitor any changes we're noticing, try to prepare you for the coming weeks or so. We looked at a couple Super Qualifiers 2 weeks ago, so we can see if the metagame is looking any different, if things are staying consistent, with decks that are showing up again. So let's see what we have here. Starting off the top 8, we have Z-Man, a 2340 with Dimir Inverter. Nothing particularly noteworthy I saw on this list.
Yeah, except for the pilot. because I do believe that Z-Man 2340 is Zan Syed.
Oh, I think I remember them tweeting that like Zan had been like not playing Dimir Inverter, and he was like, okay, fine, and he just wins the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, Zan, good work. Very competent pilot with a very competent deck. Next up, second place, Olivetti, also on Dimir Inverter. We had a Dimir Inverter finals. Nothing too crazy here. Something I noticed was a Singleton Disfigure and a Singleton Drown the Lock main. And instead of like a Singleton Narset, they chose to run Ashiok Nightmare Muse in like kind of the Walker flex spot.
Mm-hmm.
Disfigure, what do you think was the rationale there? The -2/-2.
Can you actually read that card for me?
So Disfigure is a single black for an instant.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally in Zendikar, I believe. And the text is, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn.
It's like a little mini,
It's a worse dead weight.
I think some people would say better, but depends.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what this is for. I mean, generally this would be for obviously killing a small creature or killing a creature that has something like indestructible.
Sure.
I'm just going to admit that I'm not sure what comes to mind here. I'm assuming it's something in the mono white deck. Maybe it's to help you try to get rid of Walking Ballista or something like that in a way that they can't. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts, Shane?
Not really.
Well, I'm glad you did research into this question before you asked us on the show, on air.
Well, I mean, I was curious if you guys had any thoughts. It's not big enough to take down like a Heliod. Do you know what I mean? And it's maybe if like it takes some damage and you finish it off with like a Disfigure, who knows?
Maybe it's to deal with like a turn 1 mana dork.
I mean, Fatal Push does that though. But maybe they were maxed out on Fatal Push, though, I suspect.
It's extra Fatal Push. Yeah.
So, if anyone in the world out there has some ideas for why the Disfigure main and one on the side, I believe, let us know. Third place, another name in the Pioneer circuit, Bautuina, the grinder. I think they typically lead the trophy leader board on Pioneer all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They take third on Sultai Delirium. Interestingly, I thought there was 2 Ashiok Nightmare Muse main in this list. So Ashiok Nightmare Muse is showing up more regularly in Pioneer.
I remember a few weeks ago when I said people should start paying attention to this card.
Yeah.
Now it's all over the place.
Batutina heard and adjusted their deck.
Seems unlikely, but yeah.
I agree with Dave.
I love that Dave. So sad he wasn't on last week.
Fourth place, Zernak on an Orzhov Doom Foretold, a heavy enchantment-based deck here. It leverages powerful effects and all sorts of enchantments like Demonic Pact, Doom Foretold, Treacherous Blessing, the Eldest Reborn, or Oath of Kaya to control the game. Finish things off with Starfield of Nyx or like Gideon of the Trials. Gideon of the Trials is also, of course, helping you not lose the game from your Demonic Pact. A little fun 1-2 combo there.
I like that. This is a pretty nice looking deck. I don't think I've heard of it before. Has it been around and just I missed it?
I've seen variants on this deck, like just heavy enchantment-based Orzhov decks. This is definitely more complete, just like a ton of enchantments. A nice power level for sure.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those decks that people have been wanting to see for a little bit. It's sort of what you might call Doom Foretold stacks, almost, in Pioneer. Demonic Pact is a very cool card. Very risky card to play. But yeah, interesting. Whole lot of enchantments in here.
How does it win?
Well, Starfield of Nyx animates your enchantments.
That's right. That's what it is.
If you have 5 or more enchantments, I believe, non-aura enchantments, they all become like animated. And
their power and toughness is their CMC, right?
I believe so.
I think that's called Opalescence, by the way. That was a card, I think, in Legends that animated enchantments.
So an opalescence effect.
Like non-world enchantments, I want to say.
Non-world.
I love world enchantments.
What about mono artifacts, though? Did it animate those?
No, it only animated poly artifacts.
Okay. All right, next up in 5th place, MLGB 92 on Mono Green Walkers. One thing I noticed in this list is they moved one Voracious Hydra out of the main into the side, and along with 2 Walking Ballistas, which is kind of typical now, there's one Singleton Voyaging Satyr still in the main to replace that Voracious Hydra.
You sound choked up about it.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, maybe they are seeing fewer creature decks that they want to have Voracious Hydra fight something. Maybe they just want that option for the ramp, for the untapping with the Voyaging Satyr. I do not know.
Voyaging Satyr and Nykthos does look really nice.
I mean, it's been a nice combo as part of the Mono Green Walkers thing for a while. I think people were trying to figure out ways to fit main deck Walking Ballistas in. They've started shaving them down to 1 or 0. MLGB92 is deciding to like move one Voyaging Satyr out, move one Voracious Hydra to the side to get those 2 Ballistas in. Maybe it's curve considerations, something to do with their X spells.
Still a good deck.
Yeah, it's good. It just sticks around. In the wish board, I'm starting to see Meteor Golem as kind of a standard inclusion, which is a 7-mana 3/3 artifact creature. So you can fetch it up with Vivian and Karn. When it ETBs, it destroys any non-land permanent, because otherwise a 7-mana 3/3 is not very on rate. But ETBing and killing anything that's not a land is quite good. Shadow Spear is a more common inclusion as well. It's nice to be able to get that lifelink. And what does it also give? Trample, is that correct?
It does.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
How about the Emrakul, the Promised End? Is that normal in the sideboard for this?
Yeah, typically the creatures that are run are like an Ulamog and an Emrakul. Honestly, I haven't had a game where Ulamog didn't pretty much end things on the spot. I've never actually cast the Emrakul, even when I could, because it was like the Ulamog was sort of more of a game ender on the spot. I'm sure that it's nice sometimes to have, but it's always there. Maybe just because there's not much better in the Pioneer suite of creature tutors right now, or cards to tutor up.
Fair. All right, 6th place.
And 7th place. And why not 8th place?
And 8th place. Okay. So, Neats Resner, Urza Major, which is a good name, by the way, and Kel Dweller, all on mono black aggro. This deck won't die, much like the creatures in it.
I can't believe you just called this person Kel Dweller when it's Cell Dweller. Why would that be a hard C?
You're right. Why would
It's like me trying to teach phonics to my 4-year-old here. I'm like, it's not Kel, Cell. Cell.
Do you think they're a fan of mobile phones? and good roaming plans?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, free nights and weekends, still relevant.
Yeah, these decks are all very similar. There's no like weird, novel creatures showing up here. 2 to 3 Spawn of Mayhem seems like the default now. I'm not sure if that was always the case. I felt like Spawn of Mayhem sort of came in and out to like sort of, I think it was trying to fight the mirrors because it could block Rankle, I believe. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that this is just here. All these decks are similar, and they just took 6th, 7th, and 8th place.
Yeah, there's only one that's running a pair of Gifted Aetherborn, which is kind of a interesting card to have around. Thought you were going to have some aggro. Maybe you didn't.
So these 3 mono black decks in the top 8 are the only 3 mono black decks in the top 32.
That's true. So they all performed quite well. Nice job, you guys. Speaking
of the top 32... Shane, would you like to take us through the breakdown?
Oh man, I don't know if I do, because it's not anything that I really like seeing. I see 6 Dimir Inverter decks in the top 32.
Okay.
5 Sultai Delirium midrange style decks. 3 mono white, 3 mono black, and kind of just a little tangent off those is we have 2 mono black vampires. Going along for the mono black aggro ride. It's a little bit more of a long game, a little bit more of a mid-rangey deck, but it still is kind of the similar core. We see 2 more mono green walkers and 2 Lotus Breach still showing up. I did notice that there was more Damping Sphere back in people's sideboards than the last time we looked over the Pioneer Super Qualifiers, where people were shaving pretty hard on those.
This other bucket is huge. 9 decks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's 9 one-of decks here. And when you combine all the different decks in this top 32, there's still 15 different decks in this bracket at the tournament, which isn't like a benchmark per se, but it's something that we've kind of noticed over these super qualifiers that we are keeping an eye on, that like somewhere between 15 and 20 seems to be the deck diversity number of Pioneer. It's just this top 8 that looks kind of homogenized and boring and like not necessarily suspicious to me, just kind of uninspiring.
Yeah, that's something I want to talk about kind of like in our takeaways. Maybe we'll just go right to it, right? Inverter's still at the top of the meta. 2 weeks ago, we looked at like kind of a double event. We had 64 decks. Inverter was close to the top there. It was like just behind Mono White, I believe. And we see Dimir taking the top spot here. 6 out of the 32. Not quite a quarter. I mean, it's like what, 18%, 19%, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's between 15 and 16%, I guess.
Wow, that's a really good work, Dave.
That's not what it is. It's
Great math.
So does this deck need to hit the road or what? Like, who cares that WotC thinks that it's a 50% deck? It's continually showing up. It's a combo control deck that potentially is stifling innovation and played in deck diversity.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to say it's 18.75%.
Thanks, Dave.
No, this deck should not hit the road right now. This can't be a conversation that we have immediately before the release of a new set.
That's my hope, right?
Or a conversation we have every week.
Unless we're talking about a certain otter in certain singleton formats. This is an exciting time. No, it's no wonder that like the format is getting a little boring and homogenized right before a new set comes out. It's like as solved as it could potentially be right now.
I mean, it's interesting that we're still seeing changes, though. Like, my issue is we see other decks kind of move up and down, but we see Inverter stick around as the top dog. But like you said, Stan, we are seeing Ikoria come out soon. Hopefully that can shake things up. Mono Red and Spirits this tournament, as opposed to 2 weeks ago, Mono Red and Spirits were way down in representation. Mono Whites dropped down a little bit. We see kind of Sultai, Mono Green, the Lotus Breach deck still hanging around, and Mono Black is surging up a little bit with kind of the aggro and the vampire versions as well. What's making Mono Black better right now, do you think? Do you think it's the prevalence of like the Sultai decks and maybe the Dimir removal, where it can, with Thoughtseize as well for Dimir, against Dimir rather, and the recursion of its creatures, it kind of invalidates the removal?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think it has a deck that breaks up combo with, because it has discard effects, and then also its creatures recur, so you can't really kill them, and it's not like they're blocking all that much. So
yeah,
I think that's probably part of it. I think sometimes it's hard to say that like these are correlated things necessarily. Like there could be just like a random occurrence that black decks ended up in the top 8 is partially random. But there's a lot of different things here in the top 8. But yeah, somehow Mono Black.
Rankle. I think Rankle is quite good.
It's always good.
You just do whatever you want to do when you cast a Rankle. If you're worried about a combo player, he makes them discard a card. If you're worried about a creature on the board, he makes them sack a creature.
You want a Coca-Cola caffeine free? He pours you one.
Glug glug.
Is it 1987? Who drinks caffeine-free Coke? Is that a product that's accessible now?
I used to think that was the best tasting Coke.
What? Like you thought it tasted appreciably different?
Oh, yeah.
No.
I haven't had it in a long time. I don't know if I would stand by that, but I used to be convinced that caffeine-free Coke was actually the best Coke.
I mean, Coca-Cola is the best Coke, but...
Yeah. Well, I do think that Pioneer could use a little bit of caffeine right now because it does feel a little sleepy at the moment. So hopefully Ikoria does. shake it up, like Shane said. And I think that there's a lot of potential for that to happen, given the cards that you all talked about last week and some of the things we're talking about this week.
For sure.
Yeah, the timing of Ikoria is nice just because Pioneer is such a new format still. We kind of forget that it's less than a year old and it was super dynamic at launch. That I think every new set, especially that we're in this era of very powerful and influential sets, it's going to have, I think, a huge impact on this format.
100%. I'm looking forward to it. There's some additions to decks that I like right now, and I think there's going to be some new decks that just get created out of the new additions to the Pioneer card pool.
So let's go. Let's not talk about this dead format anymore. Let's move on to
Elob.
So, Dave, are you taking us into the dive down?
I'm working on it. You guys need to, I can only take you so far. Stan needs to nod his head and say the magic words.
Stay with us. So because we did our card evaluation criteria last week, and Dave said that he has no corrections to issue in today's part 2 episode, we're just going to jump into the cards, and we'll let Dave start us off because he didn't get to tell us which cards he was excited about. So give me one, Dave. Give me one card.
Well, I think that I have one card, and I have a feeling like this is a card that you and I are of one mind about, Stan.
Is it worth a card, David?
It's maybe worth more than one card. Yeah, so it's one mind, 2 cards. Just the way I like it to be. Because the card I want to talk about today, the first slot I'm using is, of course, the card of one mind, which is 2 generic mana and a blue, a sorcery that says some very special words to me on it. It's 2 sentences of special words. One is, this spell costs 2 generic less to cast if you control a human creature and a non-human creature. And the second line just says, draw 2 cards.
Nice.
That's
pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's amazing rate. And I gotta say, this is the only card for me that I saw on the spoilers of Ikoria that I actually went, whoa.
Nice.
If you want to know where I'm at in my life these days, I don't care about flashy mythics. Take your mutates and send them to another state. I don't know. You know me. There's 2 things that I like to do in Magic, and one of them is draw cards, and the other one is reduce costs. And I'm all out of ways to reduce costs, so I guess I'm drawing cards. But I mean, look, drawing 2 cards for 1 CMC is really, really, really powerful. It's just raw card advantage. It's my favorite thing in the world. And I just think the card is really good. Stan, you want to hop in here for a second? Because I know that you probably want to just talk about this card too.
This card is amazing. I love that as soon as this card came out, everyone was just like, oh, this is for young Pyromancer decks. Which, not to make this all about me, but this set really feels like a Is It Mage's dream. In part because of cards like this, like
absolutely.
Cards like this. The fact that young Pyromancer essentially by himself makes this card live is huge, though it is worth noting that you can't only have the young PZ out. You actually have to have PZ and an elemental out when you cast a spell in order to get that benefit.
Yeah.
But that's in the young Pyromancer decks, that's usually very easy to do.
Yeah, so you got to opt after you play your young Pyromancer or something like that. But I think, just to be clear, I think this card is something that will define or power decks both in Modern and Pioneer, no doubt, in my mind. It's a card that provides so much value, and there are ways to play this, I think, in more decks than a card like Light Up the Stage gets played in, which I think is sort of the closest analog to what this card is in a lot of ways. So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think Light Up the Stage kind of snuck up on people a little bit originally. But by the end of the first couple of weeks of that format after Light Up the Stage came out, people were like, well, I'm so glad that they printed Ancestral Recall into current sets and into Modern, and Pioneer didn't exist, but into Modern basically, because the card is that powerful. But I think that Of One Mind has the potential to be even better for a couple of really specific reasons. One is Light Up the Stage is pretty easy to enable, okay? But sometimes you get this glut where you draw a whole bunch of Light Up the Stages, and you're like, this is terrible because I have to wait multiple turns to cast this card. And sometimes in order to enable the cost reduction, you sort of have to give yourself a little bit of one of those tempo negative plays where maybe you fire off a gut shot at somebody's face when you were going to do something else. Maybe you attack with 2 creatures into 1 creature so that then, losing one of your chump attacking basically, so you get a point of damage through so you can fire off Light Up the Stage. I think that this restriction's a little harder, but at the same time, you don't have to play these kind of like tempo negative plays sometimes to make it work. So that's one check mark for me that I think is a situation where Of One Mind can be better. The other thing is you just straight up draw the cards. And that is something that is super important in the sense of chaining cards together. Because you can Of One Mind into Of One Mind into Of One Mind much more I think much more positively than if you all of a sudden want to cast I guess what I'm really trying to say is you don't want to cast 2 Light Up the Stages in a turn if you can avoid it, because it's so hard to work through all 4 cards in the exile pile on your next turn, where if you cast multiple Of One Minds, you just get all those extra cards. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes both ways. One of the perks of that first Light Up the Stage is that your opponent can never interact with your exiled cards.
Is it a perk? You're playing an aggressive deck. It's not like you really care about being thought seized all that much.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, that is like a corner case for sure, where they can't make you discard your cards. They know what the cards are off of Light Up the Stage, though, which is a little bit annoying. I mean, it's never game breaking, but I just think it's one of those things where I would rather have cards in my hand where if I choose not to cast them this turn, I don't have to.
Yeah.
You can play this in a deck with cards that have high CMCs. It was very hard to do that with Light Up the Stage.
Sure. That's fair.
So I think that there's a chance that this is better. And like Stan said, I think that it's gonna fit into blue-red decks naturally. It's one of my favorite types of decks to play. We all know it's Stan's favorite type of deck to play. I do think the difference is here you have to play it in a deck that's a little bit more aggressive because you're going to have creatures floating around to get this card to work. And so you're an attacking deck, right? So I've seen people talk about things like, does it go into a Delver deck where your turn 1 Delver into turn 2 Terramander plus Of One Mind? Great turn 2, right? That can totally work. It's also got the Young Pyromancer interaction that I think a ton of people were excited about after that was pointed out online. I imagine we're all going to jam these all together into one deck, essentially, potentially. But, it's been a while since I've tried to play Delver. I also know that Delver is not necessarily like a threat that has proven itself in Modern. But I think that there are analogs that are going to make this work.
Delver loves to pop up every once in a while and just say, hey, remember me?
Yeah.
It's me, Delver.
One other application I think might be in certain blue-white Stoneforge decks, because Stoneforge Mystic is not a human, but you can maybe play it with like a Snapcat after a Snapcaster Mage, maybe along with a Mutavault. I can see that possibly making the cut, especially like even if like Stoneforge gets killed, you still have a Germ out there.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, that's also not a human.
Yeah, and then you can play this maybe at instant speed with Teferi Time Raveler, possibly.
Nice.
Yeah. I just think when it comes down to it, this card is super powerful and definitely my favorite card in the set. I can't wait to see where it gets a home so that I can abuse it and go from there.
Maybe Is It Phoenix Pioneer deck that runs Young Pyromancer instead of Thing in the Ice?
Yes. I have some other thoughts about Is It Phoenix coming up later.
Cool.
But I do think that this is the type of card that gets powered by that deck or in that deck as well. So super awesome card. I think it's hard to disagree with it being one of the best cards in the set.
Maybe we can rebrand our show.
Of 3 Mind.
The Of One Mind cast.
Dave,
as long as we're talking about blue cards, I got a blue card for you.
Okay.
And I was prepared to talk about this last week and it just never came up. But I was determined to jam it into the notes this week too, because I think there are thoughts to be thunk. and that is regarding the card Shark Typhoon.
I'm so happy you waited for me to talk about this card.
5 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. I don't think I'll ever use that ability, because what I'd like to do is cycle this card for X, 1 blue, discard this card, draw a card, and when you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying.
This is Sharknado.
TM.
So here's the thing about this card. I think it could be playable if you just completely ignore that first line of text and only think about that cycling ability.
I have a hot take. I think it's playable even with the other line of text in it.
Wow.
Ooh,
Really?
David, cool down.
Well, I mean, it's not playable without cycling, to be clear.
course.
I just think that it's not going to be unheard of for people to get this into play and then cast a cryptic command and get an air elemental off of their cryptic command as well. You know, like,
maybe.
so we'll see.
I think the reason this card is possibly worth testing, or as I said last week, I wouldn't be embarrassed to test it, is because the creature both flies and it can't be countered. And this isn't a spell that you're casting either. You're using an ability.
Mm-hmm.
So unless we start to see more people using stifle effects like Disallow and Pioneer or
Nimble
Obstructionist, the other cycle card that's great, this feels like it could be a nice way for control decks to hold up interaction, and when there's no interaction, just make an uncounterable threat.
It's cool. Like, I mean, just making a card at end step, off the cycle, making a flying creature, essentially sort of hasty. Pretty cool.
This is a long game plan card, I think, though. Like, you have to do what? You got to cast this for 6 to make an air elemental. Like, you have to cycle it for 6 to make an air elemental. That's probably pretty reasonable out of blue red as like a threat to have in the deck. I don't know how many you actually play of this. Like, do you have like 2 in your deck just because it's sort of a card neutral threat? It's a little bit, you know what card it reminds me of a little bit in a weird way is Crackling Drake. Where it's kind of like, okay, it's not that it's not counterable, but you get a card back immediately for playing this giant flying threat out of a spells deck.
Right. It's as if Cryptic Command read, draw a card, make a body.
Yeah, that's true.
4 mana for a 2/2 flyer.
So, okay, so I want to like this card a lot too, right? But it's even the cycle is not exactly cheap. It's like X1 blue. So to even get a 3/3 out of it, you have to have 5 mana up.
I think that's what I just said about an air elemental for 6.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, how are you getting?
But why do you need to make a 3/3?
Why do you need to play this card at all? Like, it's like, what? Like, is this worth a card in your deck? Like, what kind of deck is going to play this with 5 and a blue as the enchantment?
That's my point. Like, I don't think the deck that wants to play this ever wants to tap out for a 6 mana enchantment.
Yeah, I think it'll happen 5% of the time or 10% of the time where somebody gets so far ahead and top decks this with 9 lands up and it's just like, all right, I'll play it. Like, that's fine. And then every spell they have is a shark is the thing after that. So if they land this threat with counter magic, then they can get through some real attrition. So that's why it costs so much. I mean, I think this deck is, again, this is a different blue-red spells deck card in my mind. This is a nice finisher to have an option for in Blue Moon. I think sometimes if you want to play a fair kind of Blue Moon game instead of a non-interactive one or over the top combo version, you can play this and grind people out with it.
Maybe blue-black also.
Yeah.
I don't like it for blue-white very much because you're counting on wraths.
Yeah.
To control the board.
All right.
We'll see.
I think this card is good too, for what it's worth. I just think it's like a 1 of or 2 of. It's not a 4 of. Like, Of One Mind is going to be a card that somebody's going to be talking about wanting to ban soon. And this is just a very good tool in your toolbox, I think.
Should we be the first people to tweet it? Set just came out, already sick of On One Mind.
No, because people are going to be sick of the card that Shane wants to talk about next, much sooner than they're going to be sick of One Mind.
You think so?
Yeah.
You think Kinnan Nightbonder Prodigy?
Yep.
They're going to be sick of Kinnan?
Yep.
I loved him, and as good as it gets, he really played off of Jack Nicholson really well.
Wasn't he mad about you too?
Isn't that Paul Reiser?
I thought Greg Kinnear was like their buddy. What TV show was Greg Kinnear in?
I don't know. Okay, so we got Greg Kinnear Bonder Prodigy. green blue, legendary creature, human Kinnan, human druid. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, non-land permanent, okay? So it's not just a creature. You add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. It also has an activated ability, 5 green blue. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's also a 2/2. Okay.
There's so much text in this card that I read all of Greg Kinnear's Wikipedia article while you were reading it out loud.
The card doesn't even look like Greg Kinnear.
Well, they messed up. They did not give the art person the correct direction. So we have this cheap creature that enables your mana creatures and other mana producing non-land permanents to make more mana. So you have things like Mox Amber, Astrolabe, Chromatic Eggs, etc. I can see this being more useful in Modern than Pioneer, perhaps, because you have your Arkham's Astrolabe, you have your Mox Amber, you have your Chromatic Star, you have your Chromatic Sphere, you have that kind of stuff that always annoys people in these artifacty type decks. But there's going to be some viability in Pioneer, I think.
You know who has really good mana in Pioneer? Teamer.
Mm-hmm.
And this with, what's that elf that it's green-red hybrid mana. When it enters, it makes green-red.
Oh, yeah. It's...
No, we have to tap it. You have to tap it.
Yeah, you have to tap it to make Kinnan go.
Well, hear me out.
Okay.
Turn 1, Llanowar Elves. Turn 2, land.
Burning Tree Emissary.
Tap your 2 first lands to cast this. Then you tap that Llanowar Elves for Burning Tree Emissary.
Okay. I mean, sure.
I love it.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the deck.
I think people are going to be looking to do stuff that's a little more broken with this card, unfortunately. The big chat that I've seen from people online, and including like Yeoman5, like who's a well-known kind of Magic Online grinder, and people in our Slack channel is Kethis plus Kinnan, which is apparently totally wild. And Amber is probably just a free roll in it. And yeah.
Yeah, Kethis combo with this, certainly dangerous. People seem to like the Kethis combo, so this will come into play there as well. The extra mana off of your non-land permanents is why this is better a lot of times than like a Leyline of Abundance effect, because that's only your mana creatures, and this just ramps any non-land mana you've got going on. Interestingly, in Modern, though, it doesn't add on to your Urza mana, because Urza is like the source of the mana and the artifact is the non-land permanent being tapped. So it doesn't work out quite so well there. I don't think Urza needs that to work out quite so well. So I'm glad it doesn't.
Yeah, it would be awful if this made Urza even better, for sure.
For like mana dork decks, though, you kind of have to have like 2 other mana dorks in play in order for this to be better than like a regular mana dork. So I'm not sure it's going to get there in like a ramp style deck, which is probably good because I think there's plenty of options for ramp already. I think this kind of plays into more of a combo and combo-y engine with eggs and Astrolabes or Mox Ambers, and that's a little bit questionable to me.
So after you cast your Burning Tree Emissary, you can surge in a Reckless Bushwhacker and swing for 8 on turn 2.
Oh, well, that's pretty nice. But then you're also, what isn't it, Bushwhacker? So that's red. So you're doing Teamer, and you hit all 3 colors rather early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you only need the Burning Tree Emissary to produce the red to surge in your Bushwhacker.
Oh man, we got there. Don't even run red mana. Just rely on Burning Tree.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Can I also just remind you that you could play Gilded Goose over Llanowar Elf and then get different mana if you needed it. Just saying.
Let's do it. I think the 5 blue-green activated ability is kind of just gravy. It costs 7, so perhaps in some decks that ability is super relevant. I think most of the time it probably won't be unless it's part of a combo engine. Like maybe you're producing an arbitrarily large amount of mana, or you're looping a bunch of mana and you're quickly getting to, let's say, 7, and then you're tutoring 5 cards deep for a non-human creature. You want to put it onto the battlefield. So there's going to be some options there too, I think. I don't want to overlook that ability.
Yep. Card is good.
Yeah, it's a Simic Mythic. So as everyone says, that's just pre-order that and you're good to go.
Yeah. And as we've demonstrated, it can just go into any type of deck.
Any deck.
Yeah. I also wanted to give a little bit of a preview of something we're going to be talking about later. So our listeners in the Slack channel, spearheaded by KZ, did another Sleeve Believe Heave poll of listeners of the Dive Down Nation, and Kinnan was one of 2 cards that was more than 50% double sleeve in both Pioneer and Modern. And just a reminder, when we say something is double sleeve, we say that is so good that it is bad, and we actually hate it.
No. Well, yeah. Part of that might be trauma from all the blue-green cards that have ruined Magic over the last year.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't. This isn't quite as just inherently powerful as Oko, as Uro.
Yeah.
I mean, it has more than 3 letters in the name, so it can't possibly be quite as good and efficient as those two.
Yeah, but believe this card.
So we've got another blue card up next that Dave has identified.
I do. So last time I think I had a card that was sort of inherently powerful. And this one I think is kind of more like a fun one that I kind of enjoy and hope opens up a new deck archetype almost. And that is Slitherwisp.
Huh.
Slitherwisp. That's my favorite house in Harry Potter.
Yeah, I took that whole online test and they said that my Patronus was a Slitherwisp. I was really disappointed. So it is blue, black, black. So it's 3 CMC, all colored, for an elemental nightmare. And it has flash. And it says, whenever you cast another spell with flash, you draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. It is a 3/2. Mm-hmm. I will admit, when the first time I saw this card, I thought it also had flying because it's a little bit got art of a thing that looks like it would be flying. It does not have flying.
Just swing in with it and just test people.
Yeah, just see what happens. It's a lot worse than I originally thought. But I think that the cool thing here is that this is a card that draws cards, so I love it. It also does a little bit of weird draining, which is a nice bonus.
Okay, so if you swing in with a card and you say, I'll fly over for 3, is that cheating?
It's angle shooting for sure.
It's definitely angle shooting. I would not do that. Don't do that.
So
what if you say 2 in the air? Like you're asking a question?
Ooh.
So what you're saying is I would like to say that this card has 1 less power than is printed on it, and in exchange, I'm giving it flying. Can we not take away from my Slitherwisp time for like...
You're playing assault formation.
Right. Don't take away from my Slitherwisp time to do like Shane's angle corner. Okay.
Didn't you miss me, Dave?
Of course. I hope you guys missed me too. I feel like the spice is on tonight. I'm mostly interested in this card because I think it opens some new directions for blue-black in both Modern and Pioneer, because there's a lot of cool payoffs for that are with cards with flash, especially in the last year or so. You know, I'm thinking about cards like one of Stan's favorites, Brineborn Cutthroat.
What's up?
Love that card.
Yeah.
Brazen Borrower. We have that new Octopus that does the mutate thing. That has flash, Snapcaster Mage, Spellstutter Sprite. Those are all cards that I think are reasonable and good cards to try to play. I think that the thing that this really opens up, or for fun and kind of like we'll see if it becomes a good deck, is, you know, Shota Yasuoka was sort of known for playing these blue-black quote-unquote fairies decks for a long time.
Yeah.
That are sort of fairies decks and sort of not fairies decks, and have a little bit of flash, but I feel like it could take that whole archetype and push it more towards a like draw, go, hold up counters and interaction, and then play flash threats with cards that pay it off instead of just being like flashing creatures in as threats. They do little things on their own. So I think it's a cool card. I think it's a draw engine that costs no mana, which is kind of nice, even though you have to invest another card in order to get a card out of it. But still, I think it's got some possibilities.
This is going to sound very hypocritical based on another card I'm going to try to bring up a little later, but I actually think this card is pretty bad.
Oh, no.
And
Come on.
let me tell you why. Tell you why. It's 3 mana for a 3/2, which I think is pretty bad rate.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can I do 3 mana for a 3/1?
I would play that card. But, okay, so 3 mana for a 3/2, and this card doesn't do anything on its own. So as soon as it eats a shock, you're just like, you're so far behind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a inherently slam dunky kind of card, but I do keep feeling like going Brineborn Cutthroat into this card being in your deck could be kind of a core of something with a little bit of fatal pushes and ops and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. I can maybe see it making the cut in like standard or historic.
Mm-hmm.
Is fatal push historic legal? I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Not.
Well, then maybe this is a standard card. Is Brazen Borrower still in standard? I don't know. Different podcast.
Yes.
In any case.
Oh, it sure is.
Yep.
With cards like Omen of the Sea and some of the other flash cards in the set, I can maybe see it like worth a card in some more low-powered formats, but like, I don't know if this is how you want to spend 3 mana in even a place like Pioneer, where like your opponent's 3 mana turn is Gideon or Heliod or like functional game-winning spell.
Yeah, it's true. Definitely for Modern, it does not apply pressure by turn 4 or put you in a position to win a game by turn 4, which I think makes it pretty rough. So maybe I'm just dreaming, but I did think it was a cool card and a cool design and might give blue-black something to do that is a little more aggressive, a little more tempo-y.
How about we compare it to the card I wanted to bring up, which kind of feels like it's a kindred spirit to this one.
Sure.
And that was Cunning Nightbonder.
Mm-hmm.
What a name. It's a 2 mana spell, hybrid Dimir mana.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2/2 flash human rogue. Spells you cast with flash cost 1 generic mana less and can't be countered.
Ooh.
So I had this card on my spoiler list as well.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I ended up pulling it out is because I felt like this was a card that sort of didn't do anything on its own. It didn't present a threat. It didn't help you draw extra cards. But I did wonder for a little bit if these cards all went in one deck together of some kind, where this is the top of the curve and stuff below it is lower, but they don't really interact that well because it does not reduce the cost of Slitherwisp at all.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, clearly I feel like these are sort of signpost cards that they're saying like, hey, we want to try to make a deck that's blue-black flash.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you want to try blue-black flash here?
Yeah. I wonder if it's just going to be a limited archetype.
Well, I mean, this is a rare and an uncommon, so I don't think so. But it definitely could be a standard-y archetype instead of a more powered format.
Yeah.
But that card was definitely on my radar too, and I ended up deciding that I wanted to talk about this one instead because I love drawing cards. You know me.
I like the spell stand. It's a fair cost. It's a bear. So on its own, it's a flash bear with not ridiculous mana requirements because of the flexibility of the hybrid. It enables the rest of your deck, hopefully, or a lot of the rest of your deck. And like you said, it's a signpost uncommon, probably, for limited. Mm-hmm. So there may be some role players that we might have overlooked in kind of our initial spoiler pass. There's plenty of rogues. There's plenty of modern rogues. Our buddy Scott in the Nation, he has a rogues deck. Mm-hmm. So maybe this fits right in there. I'm sure it does because there's a lot of flash in there. Can't be countered is always quite nice.
Yeah, it can't be countered. The fact that it just turns Spell Stutter Sprite into a 1 mana spell, it turns Omen of the Sea into actual Ponder, or is it Preordain? I don't know. I never cast either of those two. Also, Spell Queller is now a 2 mana spell with this on the board.
Mm-hmm. Wah wah wee wah.
And like as Shane mentioned, this could just be blue. It doesn't have to be in a blue-black deck.
Yeah. Maybe I picked the wrong end.
Maybe we can both brew up blue-black flash decks and
see what happens.
Do some mirror matches.
I like Spell Queller for 2 mana, I'll say for sure.
I've played against people in Pioneer doing like a blue-red Izzet flash deck with plenty of counter spells, with flash creatures. Certainly frustrating. Even running this, like you said, Stan, without the black requirement, it might have a home.
All right, Shane, you want to take us in a different archetypical direction?
Sure. We're kind of, because I had the 3 cards last week plus some quick hits. This is not anything on my top tier, but Skycat Sovereign, white blue for a elemental cat 1/1 flying, but Skycat Sovereign gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying. It also has an activated ability, 2 white-blue, create a 1/1 white cat bird creature token with flying. The token for these, by the way, rules. So it's a super awesome token. So pick those up.
Half the reason to play this card.
Yeah. I mean, if the first time I can get a catbird token out there, I'll be happy. So this card already essentially existed as Pride of the Clouds. It's a Dissension card, so it's not Pioneer legal. I had a different activated ability. This creature, Skycat Sovereign, makes tokens more easily. I think you had to like reveal Pride of the Clouds from your hand to make a token, so you kind of had to have like 2. I think it was kind of questionable. I think blue-white spirits or like a blue-white flyers type deck can use this card, but I'm not sure it's like some game-breaking 2-drop. There's not a lot of room at the 2-drop slot. In spirits, you have the Lord, you have the Pizza Phantom, you have the Sacrifice Dude. Man, all these names are escaping me.
Selfless Spirit?
Yes, Selfless Spirit.
Supreme Phantom,
the Pizza Phantom. And there's many. There's Rattle Chains is a 2. So it's like finding room for this is not exactly easy. So it might just be a role player. Like maybe you want to take your curve down and step up your aggression. The Azorius decks right now are a little bit more controlling than the Bant ones. So typically you're running like some Teferi, you're running some main deck Mystical Disputes. You might have some Brazen Borrowers in there for some tempo plays. So this just helps you put the pedal down a little bit. It probably fits better into kind of like the budget Flyers deck that I talked about a few weeks ago in our budget episode, where you're not paying for Brazen Bower, you're not paying for Teferi. You are going to want to fit this in and just keep the pedal to the metal and try to beat your opponent down with a big catbird, elemental cat rather.
You know what would be good with this card?
Tell me.
Dovin Grand Arbiter.
Oh.
+1 until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control deals damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Dovin. -1, create a colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and you gain a life.
Yeah, there might be some interesting things I'm not thinking about. Like, if it's some Thopter synergy, some cheap flyer ability. You want this on the board when you have a Hangerback Walker blown up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this could be a different direction for that deck other than spirits, right? If for some reason you didn't want to be spirits and you wanted to play Judge's Familiar and effects like that. What's the blue one that's a pirate? The Siren Pirate that you can sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
Storm.
Yeah. Siren Storm Tamer, I think.
Yeah, Storm Tamer, that's it.
Yep, that one plus you can still run Spell Queller, but I think this is more like if you want your deck to be Empyrean Eagle and Brazen Borrower and this and Siren Storm Tamer for some reason, because it's all better activated abilities than the spirits have, this is a good way to go. And then you still get to run Spell Queller, which is the best one as far as that kind of stuff goes. You just don't have to run the Lords then. It's a cool card.
It's an interesting card. I don't think it's breaking anything wide open. I'm not even sure it fits into some existing archetypes. So I saw a funny comment on the nets. It was like, I can't wait to try this in blue-white spirits and take it out quickly.
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think any card that makes Dovin playable, that's breaking something.
I don't know if it makes Dovin playable. Quit trying to make Dovin happen.
All right, the next card that I have is another one that I'm not 100% sure on, but I think has some very clear uses potentially, and that is Blitz of the Thunder-Raptor, which is a 1 generic and a red instant that says Blitz of the Thunder-Raptor deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. So I think this card is pretty simple, right? This is a card that if you put a lot of spells in your graveyard, Stan.
Yes.
If you play a deck that puts a lot of spells in your graveyard.
I have.
I've never done that in my life.
Then you can play this card. And so in my mind, that means we're back in sort of blue-red land again, whether we are discarding cards to things like Cathartic Reunion or playing Ops or even Manamorphose, maybe, depending on what decks we're talking about. I think that this card adds a new dimension to decks like that, in that it can help you kill big creatures, which is very hard to do in blue-red shells right now, because you kind of top out at effects like maybe for example, in Prowess, you just top out at nothing. Okay. In Is It Phoenix, in Pioneer, you top out at Lava Axe. Or not Lava Axe. Why do I always call it Lava Axe? Lightning Axe?
Yeah.
Because you just want to cast Lava Axe, Dave.
I love casting Lava Axe. In Blue Moon style decks, you top out at Cryptic Command or Magmatic Sinkhole as your cards that kind of control large threats. I think this gives you another dimension, and the key to that is that it exiles something that you get rid of. And so it gives you a new tool in those decks that lets you get rid of a card like Uro, or in the space of, I think it's a little bit harder to fit into a deck like Prowess, but it lets Prowess have an active out against Wormcoil Engine.
No.
Which would be a pretty sweet thing to have access to out of the sideboard sometimes.
Dave, I'm sold.
Did that do it for you?
Wormcoil Engine did it for me, yeah. Uro was a pretty good case. Wormcoil Engine is, I think, the best case.
Yeah.
Wormcoil Engine is the best case. I agree.
Oh, I hate that card. Friend of the show, the Pen Sword, who I've never spoken to, but seems like a nice guy.
You've chatted him.
I've chatted him before when we've played on Magic Online. I saw him talking on Twitter about it being a possible alternative to Magmatic Sinkhole in Modern. I think there's a chance it fits into decks like this in both of these formats. It just depends on where you want to go. I even think there's a little tiny chance that it gives you a shot at, Is It Phoenix a shot at being a thing in Pioneer? Maybe, again, just because it shores up some bad matchups for it. I don't know. I'm always looking for a reason to want to try to play that deck. But I think that the exile clause is huge. Being able to kill a high loyalty planeswalker is also huge. You suddenly have an out to something that has 6 or 7 loyalty counters on it if you're playing the deck the right way. It also lets you keep casting your Bedlam Revelers if you're in Prowess. Like it doesn't get rid of the cards from your graveyard like a card like Magmatic Sinkhole would. I just think this is a good card to have around, and I'm kind of excited to play around with it. It has a ridiculous name. It's the type of name that makes me feel like they did not think this card was going to be good. But I think this card is going to be useful.
Blitz of the Thunder-Raptor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost like it more in Modern, because in Pioneer, you still get to delve away a lot of important spells, including the blue decks. And this doesn't count Exile the way Crackling Drake does.
Totally true.
So I almost wonder if, like, even though you can dump a bunch of spells in decks in both formats, like, if this is actually more playable in Modern for that reason.
Yeah.
2 mana is a little much for a removal spell, but I don't know. Sometimes you're spending 3 for your Magmatic Sinkhole.
Yeah. I just think the exile clause is gigantic.
Yeah, and hitting Planeswalkers is nice for 2 mana. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is. I like this card for Modern, like you're saying, Stan. I think that, like Dave was saying, the blue decks sort of rely on bouncing typically for tempo. The red burn-based removal can't keep up with some of the largest threats in the format. So you tag a Primeval Titan with this, you're feeling pretty nice.
Yeah, I just want to say, as far as Pioneer goes, I think it's important to remember that this targets Planeswalkers. And there aren't that many options for red to target Planeswalkers in Pioneer right now. Of course, there's Lightning Bolt and like regular burn spells, but
you wish there was Lightning Bolt.
Sorry, not Lightning Bolt, but there's burnish spells.
Keep dreaming, Dave. We both want Lightning Bolts in Pioneer.
Never going to happen. The point I'm trying to make though is that Lava Axe doesn't only targets creatures. Lava Coil only targets creatures. So I think that just because of the fact that it can target Planeswalkers as well, there's a decent shot that this finds a home in Pioneer because of that flexibility. But could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, even against a deck like Jund, this feels like it improves the Jund matchup for blue-red decks so much. Hits Tarmogoyf and Liliana the Veil.
Yeah.
Cash it in early against a Renin 6.
Yeah, I think it's a good card.
Do you think it actually makes cards like Thought Scour a little better than maybe even something like Serum Visions in certain modern decks?
I mean, I don't think it would lead me to do that. I feel like every deck that you would play this in is already good at getting cards into the graveyard. So the only one that I could see doing this is if I was playing something like that Grixis deck that Aspiring Spike put together a while ago, where I really want to cast like Into the Story or something like that, where I really, really need my graveyard to be full of cards or my opponent's graveyard to be full of cards in order to trigger off some of my spells, and then Thought Scour can kind of help me push whichever way I need to.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a deck that had better graveyard synergy, a la, is it Phoenix? I could see that being part of it too, but that's just not this is not going to make that happen in Modern. So,
but is it Phoenix? Another deck that runs Treasure Cruise, which that's at odds. Like, I wonder, are you swapping out Treasure Cruise? Is Treasure Cruise being swapped out for Of One Mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think it really comes down to, I think this is a super powerful sideboard card for the most part to me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll mostly be looking at it as. And maybe in those matchups, you do take out some cruises. I mean, it's probably the best card in your deck in that theoretical Pioneer Is It Phoenix deck. But, you got to do what you got to do to be able to kill Uro. And that's what it comes down to, I think.
Speaking of raptors, Labyrinth Raptor is a creature in Elob.
Yeah.
Black-red for a Nightmare Dinosaur with Menace. Whenever a creature you control with Menace becomes blocked, defending player sacrifices a creature blocking it. And then it also has an ability tacked on, why not? Black-red creatures you control with Menace get +1/+0 until end of turn. And this is a 2/2.
Stan, you're just loving these gold cards.
Bears.
These gold bears.
I've been spending too much time with my cat.
Is your cat a gold bear?
It's a 2-mana 2/2, that's for sure.
Oh.
So, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking like the value of a 2 CMC creature, but I think this card is interesting considering the amount of modern playable cards with Menace there are already, including Flameblade Adept, Insolent Neonate, Cabal Therapist, has always been looking for a home ever since that first Modern Horizons announcement. Even like Glint Sleeve Siphoner. One of the problems with Siphoner was that you would attack with it and it would die quickly if, opponent had like a couple of 3/3s out or whatever. But now this gives you a good reason to attack with your Menace creatures because it's already removing creatures just by turning itself sideways if your opponent decides to make the hard decision to block in the first place.
I mean, it's interesting. Almost all of those cards are legal in Pioneer as well. Cabal Therapist isn't, but the other ones all are. And so it makes me wonder if, you're not really blocking in Modern all that much.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But in Pioneer, there's definitely matchups that come down to creature combat interaction in that way. And so I could see it making a little bit more of an impact in that kind of shell, maybe. But
I mean, it's got to be in an aggressive shell. Like, it has to be about a deck that turns Menace creature sideways.
Yeah.
And its activated ability is like an Anthem, So the fact that it, again, just keeps motivating you to turn these creatures sideways, and some of them are already kind of powerful to begin with. Throw in some hollow ones and some discard spells for your Flameblade Adept. Black-red hollow one. Hello?
Do you think that when it all comes down to it, you and I will have fallen for 2 really cool gold rares that have different keywords on them? You picked the Menace Lord and I picked the Flash Lord, basically.
Yeah, we're gonna end up playing an arena by the end of May
against just these 2 decks against each other.
Shane, what do you think? Does this card make you want to cast a menacing dinosaur?
I mean,
you're usually the grounded one.
Here's what I think. I think Menace is a slightly underrated keyword. I think that Menace creatures do quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of decent stuff with Menace. You could make a Menace deck, see what happens. I don't think it's like it's not gonna break things wide open, but I think that there's an option for this to see some play, and that's fun. I think it's a fun card. I don't know if it's going to make a new amazing archetype, but I think that Stan brewing up a Menace deck is all I need out of this card.
That's hilarious.
How much will you pay me to do it?
I will give you 10 Magic Online tickets to run through the league.
All right, we got a deal. I'll stream it on Twitch to keep myself honest.
You can't stream it though.
So Dave, because you were gone last week, maybe you can have another one. The fans want to hear it. I know.
Can I have another one that's just for me?
Yeah.
And a deck that only I care about, that I think is not like a pillar. All right, here it is. It is Swallow Whole. And I think this card might be garbage, but I also think there's a chance this card could be very nice. Swallow Whole, maybe you skipped over it. It costs 1 white.
So single white, right?
A single white white mana. Yes, it's a 1 CMC spell. It says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, tap an untapped creature you control. Then it says, exile target tapped creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on the creature tapped to cast this spell. Okay. Super complicated stuff. But what this says basically is it's a next snap effect at sorcery speed, unfortunately, for the low cost of white and tapping a creature you have.
Stan, do you love when Dave goes to his mental archive and he's like, oh, that's a next snap effect. And we're like, oh, cool. It is. Yeah.
It's also not next snap because next snap is destroy target attacking or blocking creature, and this is exile target tapped creature, but you know what I mean. It's conditional. It's assassinate with an exile. It's stuff like that.
Sure.
I never did the Vintage Cube, so I have no idea what any of these cards are.
None of these cards are in your deck. If these are in your deck in Vintage Cube, maybe in Pauper Cube, we're talking. So look, this card is almost certainly terrible, but there's a few aspects of it that make me wonder if it could be good. So it's a white, 1 CMC white spell that exiles a target creature, right? All right, it's a target tapped creature, but it's a target creature. So that lets you get rid of things like the card I'm obsessed with right now, which is Uro, and other big creatures after they attack you, which is maybe not something people do once they realize you have Swallow Whole. But at any rate, let's say that you have a deck that wants your creatures to be targeted by spells. Anybody remember my favorite pet deck in Pioneer?
Heroic?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe
okay,
you have a creature that already wants tokens on it for some reason or another. Like, I don't know, maybe you like a Dreadhorde Arcanist with an extra token on it or something like that to be able to cast your 2 CMC spells. So what I'm saying is that I think that this might fill a hole in the removal suite for Feather in Pioneer because it gives you a chance to kill some big creatures that you didn't used to be able to get around. Now, you got to take a hit from them first to make this work, which sucks.
Yeah.
But it is another sideboard option at best that I think could work here and there. And it's kind of the same thing as Reckless Rage, right? Now, Reckless Rage is more powerful, but this is something that lets you have an out and still get some value out of your heroic triggers, put a token on your Arcanist, like I said, and just be able to continue on your game plan while you stop a second to be able to kill somebody's giant attacking creature that was swinging into you.
The creature that has attacked. It is sorcery speed.
Correct. A creature that you have gotten hit by or you've chump blocked or something like that. Yeah. Attacked.
Yeah, there's a lot of conditional stuff going on here, right? Like you have to have a vigilance creature or did an attack with your creature.
Why do you have to have a vigilance creature?
Well, I'm saying you don't have to. I'm saying if you have an untapped creature, so you want to have a creature that you can still attack with, perhaps.
Or a creature that's just been summoned.
Right.
Sure. Exactly.
In Pioneer, in Heroic, in theory. You mentioned maybe this is a nice tool to hit Uro. Are there any other creatures that are really big in Pioneer that like you're worried about? Maybe Glorybringer?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically anything that can't be killed by a Reckless Rage. So actually, Glorybringer is something that you can kill with Reckless Rage, but it's anything more than an X4. Right now, there isn't a lot of answers.
So maybe something out of like the mono green deck or Golgari Stompy.
Yeah, mono green. I mean, we're talking if someone was to attack you with Ishkana out of a Sultai Delirium deck for some reason, anything like that. But if you look at the cards that are at the top of the decks that are at the top of the metagame, there's a whole bunch of creatures that get to be bigger than that. And so having a chance to exile them, I mean, if someone attacks you with a Heliod, you can get rid of it with this. If someone's playing mono white and on the beatdown side of that particular plan.
Can you or would you use this maybe on turn 2 to deal with a mana dork?
Yeah, probably. Although usually you would have a chance to shock that or do some kind of burn-based interaction, which might be better. But it's definitely an option to have.
I do think, so with Uro in particular, if you're bringing this in to deal with Uro, it's kind of a losing battle since they've already gained 6 life probably and hit you for 6.
Right.
Hopefully you're casting this, pumping your creature, or maybe swinging for lethal at that point.
Yeah.
But again, like
Yeah.
you've done 26 damage to the opponent. So like things have to be going A-okay for you in every instance except Uro.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I do feel like there's a very low chance that this card gets here, but I'll say that, you know, when I was looking through the spoiler, this was maybe one of the only 1 CMC spells that I was like, hey, maybe. And in this one particular deck, it could be useful. So we'll see. I do think that there was a point in time where Pioneer was a format that figuring out a way to contort your deck to make conditional removal spells good was a thing to do in that format. I'm not sure that's what that format is right now, but
At least we can agree that the 1 CMC spells in Ikoria have range. Like Mysterious Egg. Ugh.
Of One Mind, nice.
I have a 1 CMC spell that I thought was kind of interesting
Okay.
because you play in multiple formats, and that's the Ozolith. Single generic mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may remove all counters from Ozolith onto target creature. Hardened Scales technology, and maybe even Izzet and Soul technology.
How does it work with modular?
Very, very well.
Shockingly is what I would say.
It's like insane and modular because you get both the modular trigger and this effect.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it doubles all the counters, and then at the beginning of combat, you get to redistribute all the counters again.
Bees on the what now? That is good.
It's pretty good, right?
That is nice.
Remember how that deck used to run Mox Opal?
I recall that spell.
Yeah. We found something to fill the spot. Not
I
really.
kind of like this in Soul just because they're playing Hangerback Walker. They're playing that creature that taps to put counters on all of your creatures. So, you know,
It can be ensouled.
and it can be Soul. But I love the idea of sacrificing your Hangerback to make a bunch of 1/1s and having the 1/1 counters to put on something else.
And you don't even have to move them. Like you can stack up counters on your Ozolith and then like skilled animate it or ensoul it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So it's got all the 1/1 counters on it, and then you make it a 5/5,
Yeah.
and then it gets all the 1/1s. Perfect.
Please.
I love it. I hate it.
I'll play it.
Well, I guess you do play in Soul. I was going to say you're not like a Hardened Scales person, but
No.
What I like about this in Ensoul Stan is that it's still on plan.
Yeah.
Like it's an artifact, a cheap artifact.
yeah.
Like it doesn't just suck. So it can be animated and it can do work for you otherwise to like counteract removal spells a little bit.
Yeah, and it also is on plan with that Serpent that comes in with a bunch of counters.
Stone Coil, yeah, for sure.
It sort of forces you, I think, to play like the Steel Overseer and Hangerback Walker plan, which in Soul kind of goes back and forth on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But maybe it just makes that version of the deck more consistent and go taller.
What about the black-green deck in Pioneer with the snakes and everything?
Like black green scales.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like less on plan, right? Because it's just an artifact. But it's certainly what might be a nice sideboard edition where you're like, okay, Fatal Push deck. Like I've got my Ozolith out here to sort of help me out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this card seems brutal. And, you know, if you have a death touch counter on something or a piece of paper that says whatever on it, then they also go onto this.
Oh, that's a good point. Like the keyword counters works.
I mean, I don't know how many of those cards are constructed playable, but yeah.
Are -1/-1 things also counters? Like if something with minus counters on it dies, can you then like...
I think you have to move them.
You can move it onto the Ozolith, and then can you move those? It says onto target creature. Can you like put them on your opponent's creatures? Like you're like, okay, Soul Scar Mage deck.
Wow.
Like your -1/- counters are getting moved around. Like this is real edgy, but kind of fun. Like this is definitely fun.
It's all targets get moved at once onto one creature. So you
okay.
don't get to distribute them. It's everything that's on Ozolith goes on to something else, and then after that creature dies, all those counters go back to Ozolith, and then they go back to something else. So it's
Well, hold on. In Shane's scenario, if you put a -1 counter on opponent's creatures, those counters don't go back to the Ozolith because a creature you control had to die.
that's right.
And Soulscar is a very popular card in both formats.
I mean, I'm not saying this is not anti Soul Scar tech, but
It is. It's canon.
but it's fun.
For the 1 out of every 8 games when I'm playing Soulscar Mage where the shrinking ability comes up.
It's so good when it does, though.
Yeah.
Dave, we saved this one for you. Neutralize.
You saved that for me? I saved that for Stan.
Oh, did Everett talk about Neutralize? Let's just talk about it again, Dave. You tell me what you think about Neutralize.
I don't think we did.
I really want Stan to talk about this card. So Stan, what do you think about this card?
I think it's cancel with just the slightest of upside in that it cycles.
I think that's a bigger upside than you might think.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, when are you cycling it, though?
When you don't need a counterspell.
Which is when?
When you have other counter spells.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, maybe they're super aggro, and you're like, okay, this 3-mana counterspell. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely, I think, a card that is going to, I think, and this is crazy for me to say, I think this is going to change the way that control decks are built a little bit, because the more that you give a control deck optionality, which is a fun way of saying options. You want to sound real smart, you say optionality. It gives control decks more options, right? And that's one thing that I have seen control decks like, and I've mentioned this a number of times. That's cast out be playable.
Yeah. This card is not modern playable, though. I just want to be clear about that. It is not modern playable.
I've heard good players talk about it as like definite new option for control decks in Modern and Pioneer.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, I think it's definitely an option in Pioneer. I think it's very good in Pioneer and will do what you said. It will. I mean, certainly I think that Absorb just like disappears now if that was still being run in Blue-Eye Control. Like, I think unless you're in a very burn heavy meta, you probably want the cycling over the life gain out of that, and also not having to use white mana for it.
Yeah.
But this card is not that far from Archmage's Charm if you really squint at it in Modern. And so I think that if you're thinking about playing Neutralize, you're probably just running Archmage's Charm in Modern because it lets you draw 2 cards sometimes. So that's why I do think that this can do a lot in Pio. I don't think it's going to do much in mode.
Mod.
The
mods versus the Pios, my favorite gang rivalry.
Yeah. But Stan hates it. I thought that you might be interested in this card, but also it's not for Modern, so I can understand why you're not that interested.
Yeah, it's the reason is I just don't like cancel. Like, that's often one of the ways I evaluate counterspells, and Archmage's Charm gets around that for the same reason Cryptic Command does, is just because it does like so much more. It potentially gets you up on cards.
Yeah. And
this doesn't. This is still always going to be a 1-for-1 for 3 mana, or maybe 2 mana, but then you could play a different card.
I mean, I could see plenty of opportunities for this to be a mana tempo advantage, but that's what you absolutely want out of your counter spells at a base level, right? Is you want them to cost less than the spells you're countering typically, or you want to have the ability to get some side benefit. Like you said, Dave, with Archmage's Charm, you can draw a couple cards, you can steal that
Death Shadow and kill it.
Death Shadow, yeah, that Aether Vial.
You know what I kind of hate about it? I think I know what it is. It's not a sideboard card. You have to play this in your main deck, and I think it's going to be really bad on the draw. So on the one hand, that means you can side it out if you're on the draw post board, but there's going to be like enough game ones where you're on the draw, and this just feels really stupid.
That's why it has cycling.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I know it's not powerful enough for Modern. At least I believe that it's not powerful enough for Modern, but I do think it helps Pioneer out a good amount.
If and when Pioneer gets a viable blue-red control deck, if it runs this card, I will play this card and try that deck.
Now, here's 2 cards that go in that deck. Neutralize is one card that goes in that deck, and the other one is Blitz of the Dragon Face, or whatever the card I was talking about a minute ago.
That's what I'm calling it.
An opt.
Yeah.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left for cards.
Let's do some quick hits.
Okay.
Let's do Shovel, because Shovel is our black-green mythic.
It's a wonderful herb that you can put in meats or desserts. It's amazing.
Really? You can put Shovel in that?
Mm-hmm. Shovel it.
Oh man. So Shovel is black-green. That's it. Black and green. Legendary human rogue, 1/3 death toucher. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters on them, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So You get 1 counter on their creatures or planeswalkers. That's it. So they have to have none at all. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. That's good. But this is slow.
Yeah.
And I think some people seem to like this card. It's a mythic. It's in Golgari colors. I don't know if I like this card very much.
Dave's shaking his head.
What do you guys think? Is this an okay card? Am I overlooking something?
I don't know why this card was like $30 originally when it was spoiled, and it's gone way down.
What am I missing?
I don't know. I don't think it's good either, to be honest.
This might be a very good commander. A. B. I agree it's super slow, but its ceiling is just insane card advantage, where either your opponent just is no longer casting creatures into the board because they have a shovel that they can't answer, or if it sticks around and maybe you can like take out their second creature with a fatal push or cast down or whatever, then you start to like accrue a bunch of card advantage from the fact that it's either virtual or on the board.
Yeah, you just got to be playing a lot of removal spells or compelling your opponents to block with their bounty cards through some kind of board situational stuff to make it work, right? Like, how many times is it going to trigger a game? Twice? Like, is that worth it if it happens twice? I mean, it's not like you can't attack with this guy. I mean, he's a 1/3. I guess he's a good blocker, but I don't know.
Maybe it's a game ender. Because of the virtual card advantage. Because your opponents can't cast creatures when this is out, and then you have, 4 to maybe 8 hand disruption spells.
Well, why can't they cast creatures though? You play this, they put a bounty counter on it, and then they have to kill it. So it's like,
yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You have to like continually be drawing into removal. I just don't see
the bounty counters on this aren't like the death counters on Tetsamok or whatever, where it's like, eventually I'm going to play this card and wrath you.
I totally thought this was Tetsamok.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, you wish. Tetsamok was ridiculous. Yeah, I just don't see this card getting there. If Grimflayer is not seeing play, I don't see how Shovel sees play.
Yeah, me either.
Tetsamok, though, I don't know.
Bring it back.
Dave, what was the card you had?
I was just going to talk about one of the planeswalkers in the set that we haven't talked about yet, because I think it is sweet. Again, like a lot of the cards I'm talked about here, I'm not sure it's good, but I think it's very cool. Narset of the Ancient Way, which is right up my alley because it is 1 RWU. And for those not in the business, that's 1 generic red, white, blue.
1 Jeskai.
Known as Jeskai. And here's what Narset does. +1, gain 2 life, add a blue, a red, or a white mana, and spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. -2, draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Narset of the Ancient Way deals damage equal to that card's CMC to target creature or planeswalker. -6, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this emblem deals 2 damage to any target.
I don't hate it.
It's cool. It's cool. It lets you play this and then cast an Opt or a Lightning Bolt or a Path to Exile on the same turn. You can -2 it and discard something giant to Magmatic Sinkhole or Blitz of the Raptor Face somebody. I think the emblem is pretty bad. Like if you look at it next to Chandra, Torch of Defiance's emblem, you're like, what? Why? But I feel like this is a really nice card, and to have like a lower CMC planeswalker for Jeskai, I think it's cool. I don't know if this is anything more than a standard card, to be honest, but I think it's also hard to play in standard because there aren't that many 1 CMC cards to take advantage of the +1. But I think this is a cool card at any rate.
I agree. I think it's cool. I don't know if it's worth it to play Jeskai in Modern for this. Yeah. And I don't think this could even really see a ton of play in Pioneer. Like if it's going to see play, it's like it's a Modern card or maybe even an older format.
It's like a one of in your Jeskai control list where you're bridging, or your Jeskai kind of like mid-rangey list where you're bridging up to Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, right? But still pretty fun.
Maybe Jeskai Through the Breach or another Jeskai combo deck where you want to actually loot cards away while doing like some damage in the process.
I mean, now you're talking, it could be like Jeskai plus Nahiri.
Nahiri, yes.
Yeah, then Nahiri the Harbinger list with Emrakul.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's where I was going. It's too bad it can't like fling That'd be probably a little bit too busted.
That seems pretty good. Yeah. 4 mana, discard Emrakul, do 15 damage to you.
The loot effect is a May ability, so you can just draw a card. You don't even have to discard.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, for 4 mana, you should get the mana should get you a discard advantage for sure.
That's insane. Have we ever seen that?
I don't think we've seen anything written quite like that before, where it's like you may discard a card.
And you can discard an Emrakul, deal 15
Deal 15.
to a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
As long as the Tarmogoyf doesn't have 14 other card types in the graveyard.
Which it probably does. Let's be honest. It always does.
Power creep is real. All right, who's got another quick hit?
Okay, let's quickly talk about Draneth Magistrate. 1 and a white for a human wizard. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. It's a 1/3. I think this is a pretty nice sideboard card for modern humans. I think its primary use case is against Dredge. It shuts down Conflagrate, which is one of the primary ways Dredge gets your creatures off the board or finishes you off. What this does, I think, is it frees up Meddling Mage to then name other kind of long game spells that can be really annoying against humans, like let's say Life from the Loam, or like flying Death Touch threats like Stinkweed Imp. And that keeps things clear for your Mantis Riders. So you stick the Draneth Magistrate, you're naming stuff like Life from the Loam, you're naming stuff like Stinkweed Imp with your Meddling Mages, and your Mantis Rider, your other creatures are able to kind of keep getting in there and hopefully sealing the victory. So I think just shutting down Conflagrate is really good, and you already can do that with stuff like Grafdigger's Cage, right? But this is a human. And so it's on game plan in a better way, I think.
Well, Grafdigger's Cage also deals with all the creatures coming out of the graveyard by themselves.
Sure, but go wide decks are already a pain for Dredge, especially with how big the creatures and humans gets. So I think that this is probably better than a Cage, in my opinion. But Cage might have wider application than this, but we'll see. I mean, this also handles some other graveyard spell strategies like Storm and Underworld Breach, which of course Cage does as well. But again, it's on game plan. So you're not taking a turn off to cast an artifact. You're casting a human. You're pumping your Champion of the Parish. It's getting pumped with Thalia's Lieutenant, and your clock is increased.
It also deals with Uro and Kroxa.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's really here for, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think in Pioneer, I think this is likely going to find a place. I think there's some potential humans decks, given all the new humans in Ikoria. There's probably like some white-black decks that are going to be showing up, or in white decks that just want like a new angle of attacking the graveyard as well. It might not just be humans. So I think Pioneer, there's a place, potentially main deck, and I think Modern, it's likely going to be a sideboard card for humans. And maybe other white-based creature decks there.
Should we talk about the lands?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's time.
And these lands are nice.
The Triomes, baby.
The art, especially.
Triomes.
Especially that comic book borderless art. That's nice.
Yeah.
Those look really quite nice. I agree.
They're very strange to me, but all right, let's describe them. Triomes. It is our cycle of rare lands for Ikoria. And here's what one example one does. This is Ralgrin Triome.
Rolls off the tongue.
It totally does.
Ralgrin's off the tongue.
Yeah. Ralgrin's right off the tongue. It's a typed land, and the land type is island, mountain, plains.
Oh.
There's some little reminder text on here that says tap, add blue, red, or white. And then it says Ralgrin Triome enters the battlefield tapped, and it has cycling 3. So it is a cycling tri-land that always enters the battlefield tapped that are land typed, so they are fetchable.
They sure are.
What are we looking at here? What the heck?
You know what I just noticed?
Yeah, what do you notice, Dan?
The art on the full art comic book version ones create like a little diorama.
Like a panorama?
Yeah, if you put them side by side.
Oh, that's sick. That's really sick.
I can't wait to get all 5 of them out in my Niv Mizzet deck.
In your $350 secret lair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dave, I think you kind of went straight for the throat here. What kind of decks is this fitting in? Is this in like 5 color decks? Is this in 3 color decks? Like right now, so these are the cons, enemy colored mana. So this is not like a Jund card. This is like it's like Obzon, Mardu, Temur, Jeskai, all those kind of things. So we're not getting some of the classic color combinations that we're seeing in a lot of formats like Bant or Jund. And there's so many 2-color decks in Pioneer right now. Where are these fitting in?
I have no idea, to be honest.
I have no idea.
I think they're going to see play. I definitely think they're going to see play.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that's weird about them, right? When you look at them as far as fitting into Modern versus Pioneer, here's just my takes. I haven't done a ton of research on this, so I'm sure there's a lot of smarter people out there than me. My thought on these is they're an awkward fit in Modern because the mana is so good in Modern already, and you have access to, so if you know how to fetch and you're smart about playing your fetch lands, you can go and get whatever you need and have it come in untapped or tapped, depending on what situation you're in, pretty much all the time, right? On the flip side, you don't gain anything from these things being typed lands in Pioneer because there is no way to fetch lands in Pioneer, so you don't really get anything from that. So I'm not quite sure where these fit in, where they're really going to change things. On the other hand, I know tons of people are excited about these, and so I can't wait to see what I'm not seeing right now. But to me, these feel like the type of cards where you might have like 1 or 2 of them in a deck that is trying to be 3-color, and they're just gonna try to help you smooth over your mana here and there, and that might be it to me.
Yeah. I think typically multicolored decks like this, whether it's like Obzon, which used to be a thing in Modern, or let's say a 5-color deck like Niv Mizzet, is frequently you don't need to always play on curve. Like you can take a turn off, you can represent something with your fetch that the opponent can't really play into, or they don't play something that you want to remove with, let's say, your 2-mana removal spell. End of turn, you fetch up this, you untap, and you have even better mana than you may have been able to have earlier. Like even on turn 2, if you untap and you're able to get double black more easily while still having white, that's pretty nice, because previously you might have to take a lot of damage, or you don't have the double pips that you need for some of your more important spells. Like, let's say I run into that problem a lot when you want to have, let's say, black-green. Maybe you want double black for a Liliana, but then you want to be able to also play that path without doing an initial like fetch shock type thing. And so this sort of keeps your options more open in a 3, 4, or 5-color deck, because you're not always needing to hit everything on curve, or fetching at end step is no problem.
Yeah. But still, it's not like you're going to do more than run a couple of these, right, in your wedge.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you don't really want to draw these in Modern. You really want to fetch them, right?
That's almost certainly the case. I mean, late game, it's cool because you can cycle things away in the really long mid-range grindy games, which Modern is becoming more grindy in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's helpful.
Stan, what do you think about these?
This is the type of card that I find so challenging to evaluate, where it can both become like an instant staple, and they're like nearly ubiquitous, kind of like the Horizon lands after Modern Horizons got in like so many decks, and sometimes in unexpected ways, like all those Horizon lands and like burn or prowess type strategies.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to compare these two to, Stan.
Yeah.
Is like, how are these better than the Horizon lands? And I don't know if they are.
Yeah.
How do you compare them?
I don't know. My point was that like this can go both ways. Like either they become ubiquitous because like they tap for 3 colors of mana and they can be fetched, and you know, on paper that's kind of an interesting and powerful effect in the right decks, or because they always come in tapped and that cycling cost is so expensive, maybe they don't really see a lot of play, or only like 1 or 2 of them do. I just think this is like a land that I'd hold on to for a bit, just out of speculation, and it's probably going to either sit in my binder or in a commander deck for a long time. And that's the other thing. Maybe these are commander plants. Here's one thing that I think does make these interesting, is they interact really nicely with the castles. Is that it can potentially open the door for some decks to play more castles.
Yeah, and I think a lot, I'm looking at these two and I'm just thinking, how bad are these on turn 1 for a lot of decks, they're going to be multicolored. And it's probably not that bad.
I mean, there are some decks that already run the tapped lands from cons, for example, that are these lands without cycling. They're not typed and they're without cycling. They're already getting run in Pioneer occasionally, particularly in Sultai. So,
yeah, this kind of strictly better than those cons uncommon lands.
Do they make Field of Ruin a little less taxing for certain decks as well?
Explain how.
So let's say you're trying to cast a spell that's 1 in a blue, and you have a Field of Ruin and like the wrong color Shockland. Now you can always like fetch this on turn 1, cast Field of Ruin, turn 2, and then you can cast your 1 in a blue spell. I'm explaining that poorly, but I'm just wondering like if the fact that they tap for 3 mana makes some of like the restriction of running a colorless land in your deck less of an issue.
It could be.
That's the thing. Like, there's just so many little corner cases with these lands that make them potentially playable outside of Commander, where they will be at their best.
If these had cycling 2, how much better would they be? And I feel like the answer is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm just comparing these to the Horizon lands, and I know those only make 2 colors, and they're painful, but just being able to remove a Horizon land when you're flooding out late game versus having to draw into it or have it into your hand, then pay the 3 mana to cycle it, it's just a costly cycle effect that I'm not really keen on.
Honestly, at this point, I'm not even sure that they make a panorama when you put them side by side. Like,
Stan is doubting everything. He's doubting everything about them now.
Heave them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a wait and see. This is like you have kind of like a weird cough, but the doctor can't identify anything really wrong with you. And they're just like, well, just wait and see.
Hopefully you're not losing your sense of taste and smell.
Yeah. Should we take a quick break, come back with a little survey that our patrons did and figure out how the people of the nation evaluated this new set?
Let's do it. I love the listener survey.
All right, stay with us for a little listener survey.
All right, so the last few sets, one member of our community, KZ, has put together a survey and then a little presentation about the members of our Slack's favorite cards, the cards that they believe in the most, using our Sleeve, Believe, Heave patented rating system so that we can kind of share the thoughts from our community with everybody who's a listener. They're really awesome presentations. Every time he sends these to us, I'm kind of like,
this is so good too. Like,
yeah, the layout is amazing. He gets high res art for the background, so it's like these beautiful PowerPoints.
Looks like the type of PowerPoint I would see at work that like someone puts time into and like cares a little bit about like the foreground and the background of all the elements. It's beautiful. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah. So we're just going to take everybody quickly through the results of this survey for the dive down, starting with Pioneer. So let's talk about the cards that got the most sleeve rankings from survey participants in Pioneer. The top 2 cards, I think, will be of no surprise to anybody. Actually, the top 3 cards are Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, which we talked about earlier on this episode, Luris of the Dream Den, which you all talked about on the last episode, and Of One Mind, which we all talked about earlier on this episode as well. Mm-hmm. Top of the heap, followed by Sea Dasher Octopus, which you talked about on the last episode, Heartless Act.
Yep.
The Triomes series, and then finally, Dire Tactics, which I think is a card that we did not talk about before. Anybody have any thoughts about Dire Tactics, since that's one the nation's bubbled up?
We hit it in the quick hits last episode, and I think it's perfectly playable. Like I think that there will be like a white-black Humansy deck. I think even just a white-black Exile is perfectly good. Exile is nice. It's a good rate. Losing life isn't always that bad necessarily, but if you control a human, it's really good.
The flavor text on this card makes me wish that there was an Oath of the Coppercoats card, since it references that, but that is not a thing. Flavor fail.
Do you think that maybe the most natural home for this is the Stram Auras deck, even though you only have one set of humans, if I remember right?
Potentially, because you're just gaining so much life often, like just getting rid of a really annoying creature, or maybe one with a activated ability that's stymieing you.
Even a Nulamog.
Yeah.
So that's Pioneer. Pioneer had 7 cards that made it into the kind of top sleeve area.
I have to say, I think the nation is a little ambitious on Kinnan and Luris for Pioneer, perhaps. Like maybe everyone's just saying Kinnan's so good in like a Kethis deck, but I think they want to keep Kethis under control in Pioneer, but we'll see. And Luris, the CMC 2 or less for permanence is a little bit more restrictive in Pioneer than it is in Modern. But I agree. I think Heartless Act is amazing. We'll see. Like we just talked about the Triomes, so I think we'll see how those play out in Pio.
Yeah. I mean, I think Luris's most obvious home in Pioneer has sort of been bandied about to be the Auras deck, right?
Yes, for sure.
Which is just like, hey, maybe that just powers up that deck like crazy, and we get to kind of go from there. All right, let's move on to Modern. So,
It looks familiar.
It does look familiar because the top sleeve cards for Modern were Kinnan, Luris, Of One Mind, and the Triumph series for Modern. And again, I would point out, which KZ so helpfully pointed out, that Kinnan and Luris were both over 50% people saying that they are double sleeve cards, which is our sort of alarm system rating. Both in Modern and Pioneer, people think that those cards are potentially trouble.
Is that why they have that little orange border?
That is why they have the little orange border.
Nice.
That stands out so well against the background.
Man, KZ, killing it.
Yep. So nothing new here. I mean, we just talked about most of these cards. I totally agree that these are kind of top of the heap. I do think there's some interesting cards on the next page that maybe some of us talked about, some of us haven't had a chance to talk about. So the safest bets cards is cards that were given no heave ratings.
Oh, I like this.
I want to fire a couple of cards at you guys. So the top 6 on this list are the ones that got 0% heaves in Modern and in Pioneer were Luris, Of One Mind, the Triomes, Daneth Magistrate, which we just talked about, Luminous Broodmoth, which we just talked about, General Kudrow, Lisa Kudrow's grandpa, and Sprite Dragon, all got no heaves in Modern and Pioneer. Other than that, the rest of the list that we have here is stuff that got no heaves in Pioneer, but I do have some questions about some of the cards on here. The first one I want to ask, I'm going to put Stan on the hot seat. Stan, have you talked about Yadaro Wandering Monster anywhere?
No, I haven't.
People like this card. I've been hearing rumblings.
What do you think about this card, Stan?
All right, I'm going to read it out loud because I needed to read it for myself. 5 red for a legendary dinosaur turtle. So far, so good.
Yeah, I'm on board.
Trample, haste, cycling 1 in a red. When you cycle Yadaro, shuffle it into your library from your graveyard. So you're not shuffling your whole graveyard, just
Yadaro.
Just this one card. Okay. And if you've cycled a card named Yadaro 4 or more times this game, put it onto the battlefield from your graveyard instead. It is an 8/8.
With trample and haste.
Yeah. So you have to keep count of how many times you cycle this card that keeps going back into your library. That's annoying.
I've heard of this as like a control finisher.
Yep. That's what I was curious about too, is how do you feel about this in your control finishy kind of decks?
Here's my issue with cycling as a mechanic. It's not a spell. It's an ability. So it's hard to find other cards to interact with cycling in control decks.
Do you need them to interact?
No, not necessarily, but having a spell that cycles for upside is good. Sometimes upside can be good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just thought this card was interesting. This is another card I saw the Pensword talking about that definitely piqued my interest in the sense of just being like, I'm just going to I'm going to hold up counter spells. I'm going to cycle this over and over again, and then I'll be able to hit you with an 8/8. And then if you kill it, I'll be able to hit you with another 8/8 because it's 4 or more. So every time you cycle it again after the 4th time,
yeah,
it comes into play again.
Well, it's a legendary, so you can only have 1 on the board.
Yeah. That's what I mean, though. It's like if they kill it, you get to do it again. If they kill it, you get to do it again. So,
yeah,
it's kind of a different way to get to a what's the backside of Thing in the Ice called again?
An Awoken Horror.
Awoken Horror, yeah. It's a different waking horror. It's a wandering horror.
And that is a creature that you wish has trample.
Right.
Or if it's Dan playing it, it's the back of his sleeve.
Yeah, it's true. All right. The other card I wanted to ask folks about sorry, that was not a sentence, was Titan's Nest. Are you familiar with Titan's Nest? It's at the end of the list here. So Titan's Nest is the card that gives all of your, functionally it's an enchantment that gives all of your spells delve, because you can remove cards from your graveyard in order to give a colorless mana for a non-X colored spell.
Let me read it.
Sure.
1 blue, green, black. Enchantment at rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Exile a card from your graveyard. So this is another line of text. This is an activated ability.
Right.
Exile a card from your graveyard. Add colorless mana, not generic, but specifically colorless mana. Spend this mana only to cast a colored spell without X in its mana cost.
That is a lot of contorting in those rules.
Yeah.
But like I said, basically what it does is it gives your colored spells delve. All of your colored spells delve. Not colored non-X spells. I don't know. A lot of people think this card might be broken. It feels like a card that is set up to be broken, but I'm not sure how to break it. And you got to get a lot of value out of it to make up for playing a 4 mana do nothing enchantment. So I'm kind of out on it, but
yeah.
Yeah, that's the risk, right? It's 4 mana, doesn't do anything by itself right away.
Yep.
Commander card.
Yep. Last thing I wanted to ask you all about, there was a completion of a many years long cycle in this set. I think that they hyped it a little bit via Rosewater's Twitter account maybe, but they made a new cycle of ultimatums, none of which we have spoken about on the podcast so far. And the reason is they're all terrible.
Well, some people have faith.
I have no faith.
All right, Eerie Ultimatum, which
Yep.
is the Abzan one, and Pioneer is a Believe Plus.
From our listeners, yeah. Believe Plus, I guess, is pretty good. And this is the one that says, return any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. Seems like a maybe.
Have any of these ultimatums actually been really good besides Cruel Ultimatum sometimes seeing some fringe play?
As a one-of in a fringe deck.
So good in standard, right? It was a format defining card, and Cruel Ultimatum was in standard.
Yeah.
It has never been good in anything other than that. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's cool they finished it.
Yeah. It's kind of sad that there isn't one of these that seems like it's a possible thing worth going towards in Modern or Pio, but
People do bring up these cards in the same sentence as Fires of Invention. And I think having Fires of Invention around to potentially cast these for free, though you still need to have 7 lands, I think makes it considerable.
yeah.
Like, you know, Fires of Invention with the Jeskai Ultimatum, you'll always find a second spell to cast after you cast the Jeskai Ultimatum and draw 5 cards.
It's true. Maybe you'll find another Jeskai ultimatum.
Yeah. Deal 10 damage. Why not? Draw 10 cards, deal 10 damage. Seems good.
Perfect. So anyway, that is that's the results of our listener survey. So thanks again to KZ for putting this together for us and sending us such a beautiful presentation. And we really appreciate your contributions. I know everyone loves doing these. So if you want to participate in the future, you know, hop over in the Slack.
God.
We'd love to have you.
KZ,
Nice
I
work,
want to
KZ.
see your portfolio. I feel like there's some good work in there that I'm just not aware of. For now, that does wrap up this week's episode. This was a lot of fun. I'm kind of sad that spoiler season is over because in a way, these are my favorite episodes to do, except when I can convince my co-host to do a dive on a control deck. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast or pick our brain on something modern or pioneer, tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon. Find that at patreon.com/thedivedown. If you're at home like we are, we'll keep you company on Slack. Also, shout out to manatraders.com for sponsoring The Dive Down. Sign up for Mana Traders using promo code The Dive Down, all one word, and get 15% off your first 3 months of renting Magic Online cards. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, stay inside and pre-order Single!